Thanks for joining in. It's beautiful out there. I don't know if it's going to be another hot one or what. So we're going to talk about a subject that has no name, kind of like the horse. We're going to meander through the vacillations of the mind as we go from the ego to awareness and back again. So we could call this a meandering subject between consciousness, really awareness, or the ego. So for spiritual evolution to occur, there has to be a willingness that it occur. A willingness to see others as innocent and to forgive, and forgive, and forgive. But how does one let go of the propensities of the ego? And for that matter, why does the ego cling to and base itself in guilt, shame, fear, inadequacy, hatred, and so on? Why? Because it gets juice out of it. It enjoys the misery and the suffering that ensues when someone else feels guilty or shamed or fearful or inadequate or experiences hatred. Its very survival is dependent upon the juice it gets from all the lower energy fields and emotions. All one has to do to understand and experience this is watch the nightly news, any station, and you'll experience those same inferior and inadequate emotions as you listen to the words the newscasters are using, the pictures and videos they show, and the stories they tell. Every story is designed to get the viewer upset. Now, they do a very good job at that. That's why the news programs are called programs. They are programming the viewer on a daily basis, multiple times each day. So why wouldn't any of us get upset on a fairly regular basis when interacting with the people we love? We become expert in anger, not anger management, but in getting angry, or in pointing our finger at others, or in looking at everyone but ourselves as the problem, the culprit, or the reason. For instance, in the Middle East, the warring factions love the conflict. They absolutely love it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. And for centuries at that. This side throws rocks, then the other side throws bigger rocks. And the conflict wages on. They are alive with hatred. They are devoted to their warring ways, and the ego gets juice out of all of it. So the willingness to surrender or let go of the payoff of the ego allows us to let go of everything experientially as it arises. So what do we surrender to God? It means letting go of the adrenaline pumping feeling that we get when we are righteously angry, or gleeful perhaps when proving someone else wrong. We know that we cannot serve two masters. We either love God or we love misery. We either love God or we love revenge. We either love God or we love being right. We cannot serve two masters. So it's a choice. The choice resides in the mind. Our willpower determines which master or which teacher we're going to serve. Choose the spirit and we experience joy, true joy. Choose the ego and we experience ups and downs, which everyone thinks is normal. But it's not normal. It's abnormal to be down, to be upset, to be angry, to be jealous. We've all experienced it many times. It's because we don't know any better. We know only what we know, and until we break out of the circle we have built around us, we will remain exactly where we are. It's the same thing that we experience in our daily lives every day. We are controlled, but we don't know. We don't know it. So we only know what we know. So am I willing to surrender this way, my life as it is, for the love of God, or not? To become enlightened, power has to be very powerful. And we have to be willing to give up everything for God, everything. Because at the last moment, before the ultimate experience or condition reveals itself, we will be asked to surrender our life, the core of what we think is our life, the core of the ego. It is the only time through all the lifetimes we've seemingly experienced that we will ever experience death, the death of the ego, revealing the self, the real self, the true essence of that which we are, whereupon we experience exquisite beauty and peacefulness with all of life. Now, funnily, the ego has the notion that it is going to be the same but enlightened. That's pretty funny. I'll still be me, but an enlightened me. Well, it's the last thing the ego actually wants, because once the ego goes, the personality that we have goes with it. It truly is the death of the ego. In the moment of surrender, ego death, so to speak, of awakening, we realize the splendor of all that is. We find ourselves in the presence, so enlightened that we are at that very moment rendered speechless. It is also at this moment that we realize that that which is our divine nature is our life and the source of our life. And we are that. The ego, as we all know, is very, very strong. Otherwise, it would not have accompanied us all of these lifetimes. It's constantly attempting to convince us that it is the source of our life and that it is the reason we are alive and healthy. And this is why we need to look at life differently. So if anyone out there is tied to a religion, it's probably a good idea to enhance that religion and our beliefs in it with studies from outside of that religion. Anything but that which we grew up with, as we did not choose the religion we were born into, as our religion was chosen for us by our parents because of the particular geographic location we were born into on this planet, and they were born into. Now, the more we learn of a spiritual nature, the more we fill ourselves with values that are very high on the scale of things. And this allows us to view life differently. This change helps us to see that that which is going on all around us is not reason for upset. Nothing outside of us is reason for upset. As the only thing that can upset us is a decision to lower ourselves to the inferior and inadequate. And so it is that life-changing events come only when we are ready. We are ready only when we prepare. And the only one who can prepare him or herself for this next adventure is you. Consciousness-enhancing experiences do not just happen unbidden. There's a lot of dedication, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of meditation and prayer, a lot of gratitude. And there is no misery, no anger, no projection onto others, no desires, and nothing degrading within. We must learn to move from the intellectual stage to the experiential state, wherein we go from belief to knowledge as we move ever upwards in our quest for self-realization. To walk into fear, no matter what, is necessary in order to come to the full realization that there is no such thing as fear in reality. Fear is a self-made concept that exists only between one's ears. And even that's not altogether true, as fear exists in the mind, not the brain, so it's not between the ears. In fact, fear exists in the ego mind, the wrong mind with the wrong teacher. The teacher that leads us astray and makes separation seem real. So the reason to walk into fear is to face it, address it, look directly at it, and continue forward, because the reality is that fear does not exist. But the ego is so clever that it will get us to become fearful or angry or dispirited in any number of ways. One of them being to get us angry in the name of our country. I think that's pretty funny. So it uses patriotism to stir the waters, and it works for a lot of people who consider themselves patriotic. Whoever came up with the idea that country What were they thinking? Now, to give up self-pity, to give up anger, to give up resentment, to surrender them all through forgiveness, one of the main themes in A Course in Miracles, is the willingness to remove oneself from the lower forms of consciousness. When we meditate or contemplate, we usually meditate while passive and contemplate while active, we will realize that if focusing in on the field, we will realize that witnessing is occurring on its own. So if you've meditated long enough, you'll begin to understand this. We soon realize that awareness is automatic. The light of awareness is automatic. Or the experiencer. It is not the ego self, but an impersonal aspect of awareness. So when we meditate, we learn to pull back from the content of our meditation. In other words, all the mind chatter. We pull back from that. We learn to connect with the context, and then beyond the context to the field, and even beyond that to awareness itself, the unmanifest aspect of that which is and that which we are. So, people who are dedicated to spiritual truth are more fluid, more adaptable than those who are religious and believe what they believe, because that is what they were taught to believe from a young age, not once having given it any thought, any consideration. These people are stuck in the beliefs of their ancestors, and the words that come forth from their mouths vary. But every enlightened mystic throughout all time has said the same things without variation. Anyone who has learned the truth will say the same thing, because it is not possible to say anything else. Why? Because there is no personal self to twist the truth at that level. There is no investment in doing so. There is no gain. There is no loss. Consequently, the undistorted truth is always the same. Krishna could not say anything different than what he said, and it was not different than what Christ or the Buddha said. There is only one truth, and it is only knowable subjectively. The source of one's existence, the radical subjective presence of oneself, is God immanent, and is the only absolute knowable possible. There is no other knowable possible. There is talking about, but the only way one can know is to be it. We can know about a cat, but only a cat knows what catness is. So to reach enlightenment then, we have to let go and surrender everything our ego-driven mind thinks it wants by turning away from its desires and letting the divinity that is already inside us, is already what we are, become real. Period. The spiritually destined gravitate towards that which enriches their spiritual life until such time when they choose only the path of devotion, at which point the choice to walk away from everything is the only path they wish to tread. And at that point, the great drive to reach the end begins. The willingness to walk away from everything, the seeming riches of our lives, becomes very strong. You should know that the road to God, by the way, is well traveled. We are not alone. We are taught, however, that only a few have made it and crossed over as enlightened beings. But in reality, we are all one, so we cannot be alone. We can only be together, and with the divine, the entire trip is doable. The willingness to surrender then, out of humility to God, means that we arrive at the understanding that we are innocent and suffering only because of profound ignorance. The only way out of ignorance is to transcend it and bring it to a spiritual truth. It's what A Course in Miracles is all about, taking that which is of the ego and reversing it so that its benefit is to our self, our real self, not just to the injustice or misery of another, including ourself, our ego self. So we become a student of spiritual truths, and one of the best avenues, if not only avenue, is silence. Peace resides in the silence. And the divine resides where there is peace, not lack of conflict, but true peace. Where there is peace, the love that is always present is able to shine forth, awakening us to its presence, its power, its truth. Through continual surrender to God, all things reveal themselves, and we become that which we already are. That's what I have for today, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you the next time.